Hello there, this is Dimitris Christou, and we're here with a new video tutorial, and we'll be using the modifiers again to create something nice. As I said before, you got to learn how to use the modifiers in order to create something cool. And this time around we'll be using the wave modifier. We've used the wave modifier before, but this time we'll use it in a different way. And we'll also use the cast modifier, a modifier we haven't used before, and to be honest, I rarely see it used on anything. So let's move on. We have the default cube in our scene. I'll hit the tab key to switch from object to edit mode, and hit W for the specials menu and click subdivide. Now I'll hit Shift Alt S for the 2-sphere option, and I'll bring the 2-sphere up to 1, and I'll hit W again for the specials menu and click subdivide, and Shift Alt S again for the 2-sphere menu and set it all the way up to 1. You can see at the bottom left corner. Okay, now the idea is to create a sphere that uses quad faces. Now I'm hitting the S key to scale my sphere down, and let's scale it at about there. I think we're good. Now tab key to switch from edit to object mode, and I'll hit 7 on my numeric keypad and 5 to switch to top author view, and I'll now hit the G key to grab my sphere and move it at -6 on both the X and Y axis, and we're there. Okay, you can see the sphere right here, and let's now move to the modifier panel. You can click here and click add modifier, and I'll add an array modifier. Now I'll deselect the relative offset for the array and click right here for the constant offset, and I'll set the constant offset X value to 1. So we're telling Blender that we want the array modifier to move the clones for the distance of 1 Blender unit in the X-axis. Now I'll increase the count value. I'll set it up to 13. Okay, and time for another array modifier. Click array, and again deselect relative offset and click constant offset, and this time around I'll set the Y value to 1, and you can see what we got here, and increase the count to 13 as well. So that's what we get. We got an array of spheres here. I'll hit the tab key to switch to edit mode and scale my sphere down a bit more at about here. Okay, now tab key for object mode, and I'm going to click these arrows here to collapse the array modifier settings, and time to click add modifier again, and let's now add the cast modifier. Well, what the cast modifier does is that it somehow inflates the object from within, and you can see it right here. You can increase or decrease the factor for the inflation, and the good thing about it is that the cast modifier, since it's placed below the arrays, it affects all the objects in the array, all the clones, and that's what we want. But that's not how we want it to affect our scene. So I'll hit Shift A to add an empty, and let's move to the empty options for a while. I'll increase the size from 1 to 3 just so we can see it better, and I'll change the display from plain axis to sphere. Now that the empty is in place, I'll right click to select the arrays and move to the modifiers panel again, and over here at the control object I'll click and select empty. Now as you can see, the empty, I'll right click the empty to select it, is the object that affects the placement of the cast modifier. Wherever the empty is, the cast modifier is applied, and that's exactly what we want. And generally, building an abstract or motion graphics animation, most of the times it's about object interactions. So this time we have the empty affecting the cast modifier and the arrays we see right here. Now right click to select the arrays again, and let's change the cast modifier a bit. I'll click over here, deselect the X and deselect the Y axis, and what we're doing here is telling Blender that we want the cast modifier to affect the objects only in the Z axis. So you can see that it stretches our object along the Z axis. I'll now increase the factor just to increase the strength, sort of speak, for the cast modifier, and I think we're good as it is. Now I'll move right here and click smooth shading just for the scene looking better without the faces, showing up. And I'll also add a final modifier and add a subdivision surface modifier. The subdivision is set to 1 for view and 2 for render, and I think it's really what we want. Okay, now I think we're pretty much done with this one. I'll hit Shift A and add mesh a plane. Now I'll hit the S key to scale the plane. Let's scale it up at about 7 times, and now hit the Tab key to switch from object to edit mode, and hit W for the specials menu and click subdivide. I'll increase the number of cuts up to 10 and hit W again, subdivide, and let's increase the number of cuts, let's say to 4 or maybe 5. To 5, okay. Now Tab key to go back to object mode, and time to add some modifiers for the plane here. Well, we'll actually add only one, and it's going to be a wave modifier. Now you can see what the wave modifier does, and what we want here is to click on the start position here and click empty. So what we're actually telling Blender here is to use the empty for the start position for the wave. And if we hit Shift A, Alt A for the animation, you can see how the wave modifier works. But we really don't want it to work this way, so I'll hit the Escape key, and I'm going to bring the speed from 0.25 down to 0, and hit Alt A, and now you can see that the wave modifier, since the speed is set to 0, doesn't actually work with the plane. Hit the Escape key, and what I'm going to do is increase the height. Let's set it to 0.7, and I'll also increase the narrowness, because we want the wave modifier to be pretty close around the empty object. Okay, now I think I'll decrease the height. I think it was set too high at 0.7, and I've set it to 0.4. Now again we have a new object relation. Since the wave modifier isn't applied and moving in our scene, again uses the empty, and you can see that if we move the empty around, we have both the cast modifier affecting the array object and the wave modifier affecting the plane. Now right click to cancel any movement, and what I'm going to do now is select the plane, right click to select it, and move here to the material options, to the material panel, click new. I'll decrease the specular down to 0 for my material, and I'll just add a new texture. It's set to clouds. I'll increase the size from 0.25 to 0.5, and I'll click this little tick icon here, just because we don't want the texture to affect the material. We'll only be using the texture to affect the wave modifier. Now over here you can see the texture option. I'll click this one and select texture. And I'm actually doing this just to create some sort of variation for our wave. You can see how it looked before the texture and how it looks after the texture. So if you don't like the way it changes the wave modifier application or on a plane, you can always delete the texture here. Now I'll move to the texture, and let's set the depth down to 1. I think it looks better now. I'll also click smooth shading for this one, and you can see the plane now. And what I'm going to do is hit Shift D to duplicate the plane. You can see the duplicate right here. I'll right click the right mouse button to cancel any movement, and I'll move to the modifiers, and we have two planes here. You can see the first plane and the second plane, and I'm going just to change the height option, and from 0.4 I'm going to set it to minus 0.4. So we got the top plane. Let's change the names. Top plane for this one, and bottom plane for this one, and you can see how they both been affected by the wave modifier. Now I'll hit 1 on my numeric keypad to switch to front ortho view, and hit del on my numeric keypad again just to frame the plane, and I'll hit Ctrl Alt 0 to roughly place the camera, and click this frame right here to select the camera, and I'm going to increase the Z value. Let's set it to 0.5 or 0.6, and I'll also move my camera back. Is set at minus 12, let's set it at minus 17, and I'll also increase, or actually decrease, the focal length value from 35. Let's bring it down to 30, and you see what we got here. Let's increase the Z value. Okay, at about here. Now we got everything in place. Time to add some materials for our scene, and I'm right clicking this spike here to select the arrays and move to the material options, click new, and we'll use a halo material. Okay, click halo to enable it. I'll change the color. I'll set it from white to a nice blue color at about here, and I'll decrease the size from 0.5 to 0.02. Okay, now I'll click here to add some rings to my halo, and I'll bring it down to 1. Now, as you can see in the viewport as well, the object is now treated by Blender as a halo object, and I'll right click the plane to select it, and as you can see we have a material for both the planes, so we'll just change this one to halo as well. Decrease the size, let's set it to 0.02 again, and click rings and set the number of rings to 1. Now 0 on my numeric keypad to switch to camera perspective view, and let's hit F12 to render an image. And you can see what we get. Now this one looks pretty nice. I'll hit the escape key now. But when you're working with halo materials, it's good to add some compositing to make it all look better. Now I'm splitting the 3D view here, and I'm going to change this window and make it a node editor window. I'm going to click here for the compositing nodes and click use nodes. I'll scroll my mouse wheel to zoom in, and we have the render layers and the composite node. I'll move them to the side, and I'll also hit Shift A to add output viewer node. Let's scale the viewer node as well, and let's bring it here. Let's connect the render layers to the viewer node, and let's click backdrop here to check it so we can see what we're doing. Now for this one, we're going to apply some minor compositing just to make it look better. I'll hit Shift A to add filter a glare. We have our glare node here. Let's connect it. Okay, and I'm going to set the first glare node. We're going to use another one to fog glow, and let's decrease the threshold value just to make it work at even at the less brighter pixels for our image. Now the threshold is set to 0.1. I think it looks nice as it is. I'll now hit Shift D to duplicate the glare node and again connect it. And this time around we're not going to use a fog glow, and we're going to use streaks. Let's take a look. Streaks is set to 4. You can see it here. I'll just increase the color modulation value. Okay, and I think we're good. Let me just lower down the threshold value a bit for the first glare node. Okay, let's see. Nice. And I'll add a final node. Hit Shift A and add distort, a lens distortion node. Let's connect this one as well, and I'm going to increase the dispersion value for the lens distortion node. I'm going to set it to 0.2, and you can see the effect here. And I'll just increase the size for the plane halo material from 0.02 to 0.03. Okay, I'll hit F12 to render another image, and don't forget to take the last node output and take it to the composite node as well Okay, now I like it, but I think I'll increase the threshold again. For the first glare node, I think the effect is way too strong. And let's see, I'll increase the color modulation for the second glare node at about there. Okay, and I'm going to increase the number of streaks from 4 to 5, and again it's a bit too bright. Let's set it to 0.2 for the first glare node and increase the color modulation to 0.8. Okay, we might have to work with this later on. Okay, escape key now, and pretty much as always we'll be creating an animation for our scene here, and the key to create an animation is to right click the empty here to select it, and we're going to, as you can realize, move the empty to affect both the array and the plane, and we're going to make it the easy way. I'll change the composite node window here to a graph editor, and while my empty is selected, I'll hit the I key to insert a location keyframe. Now, as you can see here at the graph node, I'm going to expand the location here, and you can see that we have an X, Y, and Z location for the empty, and I'm actually going to move the empty on the X and Y axis. So I'm going to click the Z location right here and hit the delete key to get rid of the Z location. Now you can also add keyframes for the empty, and that means that you have to hit the I key, insert the location keyframe, move some frames up, move the empty, and then hit the I key again and create a new location keyframe, etc. But we're going to do it the easy way, and I'm moving back to frame 1. And since we now got actually keyframe for the X and Y location, I'm going to hit the N key at the graph node and click on the X location and scroll down here and click add modifier, and I'm going to add a noise modifier. Now scrolling down again, and let's see the properties for the noise modifier, and we're actually applying a noise modifier for the X location values. I'll just increase the scale value here at about there, and I'll now also increase the strength value, and you can see it right here. Okay, now if I hit Alt A at 3D viewport here, you can see that the empty is moving at the X axis according to the noise value here. Now escape key, and we're going to do the same thing for the Y location. Again, add modifier, add the noise modifier, and increase the scale again, and increase the strength again. Now if you get pretty much the same, and you can see that the X and Y location look pretty much the same, you can change the phase option here to get, a different noise form for your graph. Now that we have the X and Y location set, I'll hit the play key here, and you can see that we have the empty moving in both the X and Y axis according to this noise graphs here. Now escape key to move back to frame 1, and I think I'm done with the graph editor here. I'm going to change it back to the node editor and move this one up. Okay, and What I'm going to do now is hit Shift A to add another empty. I'll increase the empty size, set it from 1 to 10 so we can clearly see it and select it. I'll right click to select the camera, hold down the Shift key and right click to select the new empty, and I'm going to hit Ctrl P and set parent to object. Okay, now that the new empty is the parent for the camera, let's rename it. I'm going to call it camera empty. We can do the following. Now I'm going to move right here at the render options and change the end frame to 300. Okay, and right click the camera empty to select it, and don't forget we're at frame 1. I'll hit the I key to insert a rotation keyframe this time around, and click right here to move to frame 300, and hit the R key to rotate and Z to constrain rotation on the Z axis, and I'm going to rotate the camera empty and therefore the camera that it's connected to the empty for 360 degrees around the Z axis. Okay, and now I key to insert a rotation keyframe for frame 300. Now quickly back to the graph editor, and we have the rotation here for the empty, and we have only rotated the empty on the Z axis, so we don't need the X and Y graphs. Let's click the Z, and I'm going to change the key. Now don't forget that we have to have the keyframe selected. If you don't have everything selected, hit the A key to select them all, and I'm going to move right here and click key and change the interpolation mode from, well, actually it's kind of curvy here, you can see it, and I'm going to change it to linear. You can see it that it moves from 0 and straight up to 360 degrees at frame 300. I'll hit 0 right here at the 3D viewport just to take a look through the camera, and let's now see how the animation looks. Okay, now we have two empties controlling the animation. We have one right here that affects the plane and the array, and we have the big empty right here that controls the camera rotation over the animation. I'll hit the escape key. Let's increase the resolution for the output. I'm going to switch back to node editor. Okay, and I'm going to change the display from image editor to full screen. Now let's just render an image at about, let's say at about here. Let's click render image. You have to wait a bit for the lens distortion to work, and that's what you get. So this is it. You can render an animation with it. You can set the output, etc. And I'll also be posting some result clip. I'm just going to, let's click the right click to select the array here, and I'm moving to the material options. I'll just change the color. Let's make it purple just to take another look. Okay, at about there. Now F12 again. Okay, I like this one. I like this one. So again, feel free to experiment. You can change the color. You can even use surface materials for your animation, or for example change the planes to a wire material. Let's see how this looks. Okay, you can see now that we have the wire material, it looks, totally different. I'll hit the escape key and I'll just add some emit for my wire material so that it's brighter, and hit F12 again. Okay, it looks nice. So again, feel free to experiment. I'll be posting my own result and sharing the blend file. So this is it, and thanks for watching.